welcome to the Racing Room powered by AK Bets. It's me, Ronan Groom, in the chair again with the usual suspects, Anthony Kaminskis, Harry Stewartmore and Tony Calvin. On this week's podcast, lads are going to talk about their time over at the Smart Bash event. We're going to talk about the racing tax that has a lot of people worried in the industry. And we'll take all your questions and discuss lots more. And then Harry's going to jump off the pod maybe around 3/4 of the way through, and the lads are going to get into the Oshi Murphy trials and tribulations over the last 7 days, I guess. But I suppose we'll start this time last week, AK. We were talking about the big transition, and the site was down for a while, and obviously we were moving to another license, and it all seemed to go rather smoothly. 7 days on, are you happy with the way things have progressed on the site?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it seems to have started quite well. There's obviously there was the downtime at the start where we migrated the database and a few things that the techie boys that are smarter than us get involved in. But yeah, it seems to have gone really well. We're back up and running. There's a couple of small little things to iron out, but overall very happy. Seems to be functioning well. Business is good. And yeah, kicking on with that fast customer service and instant withdrawals, or you know yourself.
It's very good, brilliant, onwards and upwards. So Smart Bash, gents, how did I'm sure a lot of wisdom taken in and imparted from the tree. I did catch your discussion, which is a bonus episode, which will be in people's podcast feed now if you haven't listened to it already, or you can watch the guys' discussion with Matthew Turnhale hosting over at Smart Bash for about an hour. That's on our YouTube page as well if you want to have a look at this after this podcast maybe. But how did you find it, gents? Tony, Harry, was it a worthwhile thing doing? Did you learn much? How did the discussion go? It seemed to go all right from what I've seen and listened to.
Well, Tony, it was your first one, wasn't it? So why don't
Yeah,
you?
yeah. I went to the one in. It was just a night event in London a couple of years ago. So that last year was a 2-day conference proper, wasn't it? But yeah, I thought it was fascinating. It was a bit kind of like dull in parts with some of the subjects, but
Our parts, yeah.
our part, yeah. But yeah, I thought some of the sections were fascinating. Really, I mean, they're about 10 grades above my IQ level. Some of the people, they clearly you can really see the gears whirring inside their brain when they're talking and stuff. So yeah, some very, very clever people. The Gambling Commission were there, as Harry will probably touch upon shortly. And there was just a very broad range of people. A few people I haven't seen in years were there. So yeah, it was well worthwhile. If you are betting focused and serious about your betting, I'd probably recommend going. I mean, it's probably not cheap, but like I said, for a 2-day conference. And I think a lot of people probably covered their expenses by taking the piss out of the free bar after the Fridays. Harry.
How'd you get in, Harry?
No comment. Yeah, it was very good. You're right. The Gambling Commission and IBBAS were on one panel, I think chaired by Nick Rust, wasn't it? And that was an opportunity, I think, for people to ask some quite tricky questions. I thought that the IBBAS chap, Mr. Haler, I think he's called, did a very good job. I thought the chap from the Gambling Commission was remarkably good. He dealt with it very well, and I think it was pretty decent of him to turn up to an event like that. I hope, though, really, I mean, he stayed around and was taking, notes at the back of the room. I hope that really that the value for the Gambling Commission, without wishing to sound too condescending, was that they might have actually picked up some of the information floating around, and it might sort of help add to their understanding of quite how complicated an industry this is at the moment, and how sometimes the way they regulate it is too broad brush and doesn't take account of the realities of the situation. In particular, I thought it was interesting listening to the IBBAS representative talking about the lack of guidance from the Gambling Commission when they are punishing operators, when they're fining operators. That's something that quite a lot of people have groaned about. I've moaned about it on this pod before. And again, I just think that's something the Gambling Commission could really improve, is explaining the basis upon which fines and other regulatory actions are taken. And it was interesting to hear that IBBAS sort of struggle with the same thing, really, and say that it's more difficult for them when they don't have the kind of guidance that they might expect from the Gambling Commission. But there was an awful lot discussed. That's the only one I'm going to touch on. And all of the panels, I thought the politics panel was really interesting and unusual. But really, a lot of it's about who you meet and, get talking to events like that. And I have to say, I think that by the standards of other conferences, like law conferences you go to, which are not half so interesting and not half so useful, are probably 3 times the price. So I think that perhaps sometimes people are a little bit don't quite understand how expensive those things are to put on.
Yeah, no, I thought it was really good. I also missed the politics talk, but that was mainly because I forgot to check out my room and it was coming up to 12 o'clock. So that was the reason that I missed that one. Yeah, I thought it was really good. Just from like you say, from a networking point of view, it's unbelievably valuable to me from just having a lot of people that you want to talk to in the same room. It's just very, by your own funeral. It's I can't think of many instances where you're going to get people that you actually want to talk to all in the same room. So it's kind of handy from that point of view. Lots of good stuff. I think the small gripes I heard just tended to be from like low-level bottom feeders on markets, just wanting to know how to get more accounts and thinking that you're going to spoon feed them how to win money and scale things. You're going to have to work a good bit of that out yourself, I'm afraid.
Yeah, and I think there are a few people who basically turned up there with a vitriolic dislike of bookmakers, and that was kind of coloured everything they did. And I think actually one of its strengths, that event, is that it does have both sides of the coin together. I think that's its major strength, in fact.
Yeah, no, there was lots of good stuff going on, wasn't there? Like it was, I think overall unbelievably beneficial. Like you say, if people are talking about the price, like I think 400 quid for the 2 days was probably the top price you could pay. It's definitely worth that for me. As it was for the travel and every other expense that you incurred. So if you can't get 400 quid worth of value out of it, it's probably on you. Don't go next time.
Well, €400, but you can get the lads' discussion for free on our podcast feed. So do check that out. Lots of interesting things there. Tony, you picked out the same thing I kind of thought was interesting. Harry's talking about people with multi accounts and potentially police getting involved with that sort of stuff now. We're starting to see that happen. So you can hear what the lads have to say on that. And the host, Matthew Trinhill, did a good job as well. He's giving you a good bashing at the start as well, which was a bit of crack. So
he was excellent.
A good.
It's a good job on here because he'd be asking what time Anthony's on the centre court running order today in his outfit. Very Wimbledon-esque.
not quite with these shorts. I don't think that I've got.
Very good, very good. Before we get into the racing review, gents, just a bit of sad news, I suppose, in the last few days, and the death of legendary Irish bookmaker Jimmy Hayes, who sadly passed away after a fall at Tipperary on Thursday. But this guy, real kind of legend of the game, and obviously well known for his association with JP McManus, aka a sad thing to happen, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. I think he took a fall at Tipperary on might have been last week. I don't know if it was Monday or Tuesday. I'm not 100% sure because I've obviously been away in the week and things like that. Yeah, we stood next to the Hayeses basically since one of the first pitches we bought was number 1 on the front line at Leopardstown, and the Hayeses are number 2. Joe, who works here, will be quite close to some of them as well, just from the same town, went to the same schools and stuff like that. So I always think it's just fascinating. Like I wouldn't have known of Jimmy a couple of years ago before I took my license out, basically, and he's probably lived a full, prosperous, and unbelievably interesting life. And it was just, and I've been in gambling since I was 18, and I wouldn't have known. And I think that's part of the fascination with gambling and even on course bookmakers just in general. I think there's actually some unbelievable stories that probably aren't told. And aren't as widely known. And I think Jimmy is, the more you learn about him, and like I'm learning bits and stuff over the last few days, like dripping out I was aware of the JP connection, and people had mentioned that to me when I stood next to him initially. Obviously, it was probably in the latter years of his life when even just from an average age perspective, like when we took out our license, and you're learning bits and pieces about how he was there right at the start on the box with JP in the rings, doing form for JP, different stuff, like absolutely fascinating. And if you walk past him, you wouldn't have a clue, just unassuming, a gentleman, as are all the family as well. So he's definitely going to be a huge miss to the ring, probably a huge miss to some of the on-course bookmakers that have been there longer than us and have got more stories than us, and more of a longer term connection with the Hayes family. But yeah, it's just very sad. And he was actually saying to someone, I don't know if it's the right thing to say, but like it's probably quite poignant that if you spent all your time on the racetrack and like some of your last moments are at the racetrack as well, it's probably in the fullness of time, it's probably quite a nice thing as well. Surrounded doing what you love and that kind of thing. So yeah, just very sad. And I thought it was just very decent of the on-course bookies at certain tracks with leaving the pitch fake and things like that, where we always think the on-course bookies, they'll literally row about 2 centimeters of space being taken up on somebody else's pitch, and an umbrella being 5 centimeters too big and stuff like that. I think all this stuff, like genuinely, but I think all this stuff like brings back just the connections between people, and yeah, it's obviously just very sad, but lived some life, I'd say.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, rest in peace, Jimmy, and thoughts with his family and friends. We kick on with the racing review. Tony, a busy one, I guess, with the Eclipse, obviously the highlight of the weekend, and an excellent finish there, a thrilling finish anyway. Rymore came in for lots of plaudits there, but you're sounding like you're not so sure that was the main theme in the race.
As with all of these things, when there's fine margins were involved, I mean, I think the horse got him out of trouble, which I think sounds like Ryan would probably agree with. There's no doubting the turn of 30 showed to mow down Ombudsman. But yeah, I think 50-50 whether it was a great ride or he got out of jail there. But yeah, it sounds like the Juddmonte is next for the winner, taking on Field of Gold. So yeah, that will be very interesting. We've got a question on Ombudsman and the lack of a pacemaker later, so we'll leave that to that question later. Just a couple of side issues from Sandown. Someone mentioned Five Live showed the race in a recorded format, which is probably not ideal, but with the tennis going on, the BBC have clearly got their priorities there. And a bit of positivity we'll come on to again later. Sandown got a crowd of 10,650, which is their biggest at that meeting since COVID. And that for Sandown, and I've been to some big Sandown meetings like the Brigadier Gerard that struggled to get 2,000-3,000. So that's a really impressive figure. And it wasn't the greatest of weather as well. It was pissing down here about midday. So yeah, that's impressive. Elsewhere, the Strange just edged home with the Lancashire Oaks. Probably not seen to best effect there. So if you back that one, but shortish prices like 14s for the Arc, you just want to show a little bit more there. But softer ground, if that does transpire in the day, would help her, no doubt. We had the Group 1 Prix d'Homme Prat at Deauville yesterday. Woodshawner won a bunch finish from the likes of the Lion in Winter. So that was probably substandard Group 1 form. But we had a story in the German Derby as well. The Nina Beltrami, an amateur for more than a decade, was having her first ride in the Classic, and she became the first female jockey to win a national derby that is part of the European pattern when winning the German Derby on Hock Konig. She changed Carl Burke's conversion on the line. So I bet Carl Burke was actually delighted that she made history there and he didn't win a Classic. And the only other big story from the racing review of the last week was the Colin Keane ban on Friday. He went 2 strikes over on Winlord in winning there. Hit that 8 strikes, and I don't think even Harry could get him off. It's he connected with all 8. So I think when the whip
well, he gave an interview in which he said, "I think my team are looking at an appeal, but I'm really sorry I hit the horse 8 times." So I think he may struggle.
Yeah, I mean, I think I saw some. I'm not sure where it was. I think the racing TV might be putting on a whip count on the screen. So whenever a jockey hits it, it goes 1, 2, 3, obviously. So that was quite interesting. So I imagine they'll be pouring
That
over
sounds like a recipe for serious problems, but okay.
Yeah, I mean,
Why would you do that? Like, I've not heard that.
There might have been retrospectively, but I saw it might have been on.
Oh, retrospectively, yeah, I did see someone going through the count, the strikes after the event the other day on, I think it was Racing TV. I think that's fair enough.
Yeah,
yeah.
But it's it's like as we all know, it's this angles. As you saw Ralph Odlin's Grand, obviously, it's all about the angles involved as well. So if you're going to be definitive about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, then you're going to have all the angles to your to your knowledge. So I imagine that's what his team are going to go through. But that's going to be a 14-day ban if that's the case, and also that will rule him out of Field of Gold in the Juddmonte. So that is.
I think just very quickly, I do think that there is that problem between the difference of the rules in Ireland and here, and when you've got 2 jockeys populations moving back and forth as much as they do, I think that that is a problem.
Yeah, because you're allowed 8 strikes in Ireland, but only 6 in England. So you can see why. In the heat of the moment that would.
Irish horses are just tougher. I think that's the reason for that.
But yeah, I mean that potentially. I'm not sure what the Juddmonte's worth. I think it might be £1 million. And we'll be up there for that race.
If you can't join us, we've got a spare seat at the table, haven't we?
Yeah, so we've been kindly invited up there by York, so we'll be up there on the Wednesday if anybody's going up there. But yeah, I mean, potentially massively costly for Colin Keane, not only Field of Gold, but all the Juddmonte.
Will he be back for the Juddmonte though, Tony? It's the Sussex, I think, is the issue. Would it be?
Oh, was it?
I think so. Yeah, I think it's
he's back for the
Goodwood.
Friday. I think I saw he's back for the Friday, isn't he? Of Goodwood, I thought.
Right. Okay.
I think so. Yeah. Depends on where the ban it lands. Yeah.
I thought I read Juddmonte. I'm willing to be corrected.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just trying to read it quickly here in front of me. But in any case, I guess the wider point is with Keane, I suppose, is with this big job, you just have to be way more strict on yourself or stringent and get used to it quickly, because it's all good being as good as he is, but when you're out for 2 weeks and Juddmonte are paying you that much money, I guess, for a retainer, it's a huge blow. But I guess it's a steep learning curve for him, I suppose, is the way to summarize it.
It's massively costly, isn't it? But yeah, I don't think I've missed much of any note elsewhere. But yep, so that was the racing review.
And stuff. We get stuck into our topics, gents, and we'll talk about this racing tax, which has been causing a bit of stir and a bit of concern for a lot of people within the industry. Just to give you a summary before the lads chip in here. So the BHA are saying that Treasury proposals to harmonise online gambling duties is a huge risk and could cost the industry as much as 66 million. So basically, under the current regime, betting on racing and other sports is subject to a 15% duty. But there are fears that the government's plans could lead it to be aligned with the 21% rate, which is levied on casino and slots. So lots of people have been raising this issue. John Gosden, amongst the kind of trainers and stuff, Tom Kerr has been writing about this for the Racing Post. Just to give you a flavour of what he is suggesting, he's saying bookmakers would. So the impact of the government implementing what the BHA has dubbed the racing tax would be dire. It would raise the overheads on expensive gambling products still higher and have the perverse effect of incentivizing operators to promote casino products over racing. So bookmakers have to increase their margins on racing to pay for the new tax. They'd be offering worse odds, withdrawing promotions, tightening restrictions on successful punters. These trends are already happening, a consequence of the disastrous affordability checks policy, but would accelerate further with this tax harmonisation, as it would also flood punters back towards black market operators. So lots of concern here, lads. Tony, do you want to kind of chip in here with what you've kind of read out of this and the potential of this actually happening, or what's the kind of the trend over there, or what are people feeling?
Yeah, it's a Racing Post stroke BHA campaign to actually get awareness of this issue in government. I think I saw Lisa Nandy in the Commons. I think she actually acknowledged this. But what's strange from my point of view, a lot of the focus seems to be on Conservatives, which seem to be a waste of time, really, given their position. Likes of John Gosden, obviously, he's very closely associated in the past with the likes of Matt Hancock. You've got them reaching out, sorry, to Kemi Badenoch, and pictures of her there with Dido Harding, with the Jockey Club in the background. Unless they can get into the core of the Labour Party, then I don't really fancy their chances. And obviously, with all the stuff that's gone on in the last week or so, with a new £5 billion black hole, is going to need to be addressed after the welfare U-turn. I think the government really kind of like getting involved with a 66 million pounds, potential deficit in the racing industry. I think that's going to come way down the pecking order of their priorities. But it's, as Anthony will probably say, I think it's probably true. If something does happen negatively towards racing on the tax side, I think the punters are going to pay, because the bookies will pass it on.
Yeah, it's my general, obviously, opinion on this is just any kind of increase should be decreasing it, to be honest with you. If you want to grow it, keeping it the same will just continue the managed decline. I think it's quite interesting that some of the stakeholders who have increased fees for bookmakers are putting out videos trying to not get the tax raised as well. It seems kind of interesting. A few faces there. Yeah, I could talk to death about this, but it's pretty boring stuff. I think one of the big problem is that there's just too many stakeholders, too many vested. You need somebody with the understanding. Like, you shouldn't even have to. It should be so obvious that you shouldn't have to campaign for this stuff. But there's such a lack of understanding from around the ecosystem, not just in horse racing. It's everything. It's every single sport or product offered in the legal market. There's just such a lack of overall understanding from even people in racing, in my opinion. Journalists, legislators, government. I think there's just an unbelievable lack of understanding. I think if tax on racing goes up, prices will get worse in the legal market. People will lose quicker. That'll exacerbate other problems. Time to market. On bad racing, there's very little incentive to offer illiquid prices on illiquid markets, I think. I don't know. Like, I'm toying around with different stuff in my head about what we do if I think things are becoming very unsustainable. Like, just not offering early prices on races below a certain grade, just literally just turning them off. Can be SP. Like, there's loads of things that we can do. Can just take more margin on the show. It's all should. Unfortunately, it's all to the detriment of the punter, and it's just thoroughly depressing as somebody who loves punting as well as bookmaking, I suppose. I think there'll be some fairly decent changes in the way the industry operates, no matter what they do. If they do anything to the tax on any product, basically, and they're all to the detriment of the punter in the legal market.
Yeah, Harry, do you reckon it's really that simple? And kind of Tom Kerr, I think, was alluding to it as well. It's the government under pressure, needing to take in more tax or raise tax elsewhere, and he was kind of saying that simple. Let's just raise the tax there, in racing, and we'll take more money out of it. And it's a kind of lazy, kind of reckless and early way of attaining more money without understanding the actual effect it's going to have.
It quite possibly, and I think that the problem that you get is that taxation is a political choice as well as a kind of treasury budget choice. And what party, what government is often looking for, is the political space, the political willpower to tax an industry without getting too much stick for doing it. And unfortunately, gambling is a very obvious first move on that front. And dare I say it, I think that I repeat myself ad nauseum on this. I know that I think that space has been made much wider and broader by the fact that sports punting has not differentiated itself from casino punting for far too long. And it's interesting to see, frankly, people who were basically defending casino punting as part of their as a really important funding element of horse racing, perhaps now starting to see that actually anchoring your ship to that post is perhaps not the most sensible thing in the long term. So we'll see, but I do think that the political space is there because you now look at gambling as an industry as a whole, rather than looking at sports, particularly horse racing, as one side of it, and casinos as another side.
I just think the legal market is just going to continue to contract, and I'm struggling to see I'm struggling to see any contraction in the black market. I can only see growth and substantial growth whenever we talk about any of these things.
Well, I think so much of that is going to come down to what they were funny enough talking about at Smart Bash the other day is to what extent there are two sides to the black market. Demand, in other words, you increase the demand of it, that's going to increase the supply of the black market. And the other side of it is the supply of the black market. What can be done to actually stop the black market from doing business with customers? And I think that's going to be a huge element in all of this, is what is the Gambling Commission able to do? We're told now that focusing on preventing black market operators is one of their priorities, and apparently they've been making good progress on that front. Time will tell, I think.
Indeed, we'll see how it develops. We'll move on to our second topic, lads, and that's Ammo appointing Kevin Philippart as their trainer in Freemason Lodge. So they're a trained trainer. He's going to front up the Ammo operation now. So Philippart basically had a license for the last 5 years, done quite well. He was previously assistant to the likes of Cricket Head, Christophe Clement and James Fanshawe, and he was quoted in this week saying, "I've been training horses for Ama Racing for the past 3.5 years and they've always had a great relationship. They have invested heavily in English racing over the past few years and it's a great opportunity. I can't refuse looking at the caliber of horses coming through." So Tony, a nice move for Philippart here, Kevin Philippart, and how will he get on, or how are you pronouncing what's the over under on perhaps how much long it lasts?
Is it a good move? I'm not sure, given Kia's background. I suppose it is an offer, he couldn't refuse, Godfather style, but I'm not sure I'd take it if I was a kind of like young and up and coming trainer. Like, he's bought, he spent fortunes in partnerships at the sales in the last 18 months or so. So he's going to have if they all go to him, which isn't a given because the likes of the recent £2 million purchase Ghostwriter is staying with Clive Cox at the moment anyway. But as we've seen, he is his own man. He likes to spend his money. He likes to call the shots. If I was Kevin Philippart, I'd have probably taken it on balance, but it wouldn't have been a straightforward decision. And I think he's probably going to have a plan B if it all goes tits up. Whether he's going to keep his old yard there, and I don't know how it's going to work. But it comes with obvious downsides. But at the end of the day, he's going to have a lot of expensive blue bloods flowing into Freemason Lodge, and he couldn't turn it down. But it's always a nagging doubt there that how long is it going to last, isn't it?
I think he has the plan B ready, and I was reading he's taking a few horses that he has for other owners with him as well, which might be a bit sustainable, I guess, if things do go belly up and Kia decides to do what he's done before with various jockeys. But we'll see how that develops and wish him luck.
Like Mourinho at Man United, I'd be renting the hotel room rather than buying the house, I'd say.
He's
Could
not
be,
moving too far.
could be he's independently wealthy as well, old Kevin. So, but
Say he is with that surname anyway. What's a middle name and what's a surname now? I don't even know.
I'm not.
You wouldn't
Can I
want
just say that length of name is not necessarily commensurate with wealth?
Yeah.
oh,
Very good. We wish him luck anyway. Tony, you also want to talk about all this positivity, negativity chat that we've been seeing in our comments down the last few weeks, and I'm well aware I'm potentially inviting you to be negative here about people saying we're too negative, but let's you have the floor here to answer back.
no, it's just kind of it's always annoyed me because obviously I am a glass empty kind of person, and
You can't find a glass, you.
yeah, I know. Like I said, because they're all smashed, so I haven't even got glass in the house to be even a dribble in it. But it just annoys me that we don't throw this pod together. We prep it for the whole week beforehand. When we present a case, we try to offer both sides of the both sides of the coin, as it were. And people just come at it and just say, "Oh, you're being positive." They're being negative. I mean, we're just kind of like coming at it from a journalistic point of view. We tend to take on subjects that other people don't.
Yeah.
And I would view that as the height of negativity if you just ignore topics that need to be aired and talked about. Whenever I'm out and about and people speak to me, including at Smart Bash, people clearly love the content that we do, and our numbers would reflect that. I mean, for example, I look at even our YouTube alone figures. I mean, they are 8 times the size of other kind of like Monday, kind of like weekly review podcasts as well. So I would view us as being. I think you've got to be questioning if you are going to have a journalistic angle into your podcast. And it was like I say, this isn't on the back of just reading some of the lunatics who post on the YouTube section, the comments there. I mean, it was kind of like, oh, I'm going to stop listening if you continue to be, looking at the downside. And a lot of people, that was in response to our analysis of the Curragh last week. But I'm just not buying it. I mean, like I said, the crowd numbers, that was the biggest crock of shit I've ever known, and people elsewhere were just reporting on it, if not just ignoring on it. You've got to kind of like look into the stuff, and as we all know, a lot of people in the industry, on all kind of like from all walks of the industry, whether it be kind of like racecourse executives, people from the BHA, levy board, etc. They all listen in because we like to present an informed angle on it. And the reason why I put it there, I read Johnny Deneen's article in the Racing Post along with David Jennings on Saturday, and he was just making he was making the exact point that we made about the Curragh last week, and he's obviously a lot closer to it. It's kind of like you just can't just pat people on the back and when the obvious is staring you in the face. You've got to question these things, and I think that's what we do. We do it reasonably well, and like I said, I think that is our plus point, that we do take on subjects that other people don't want to take on, and other people would like us not to. But
Yeah, I'd echo that as well. I think that is part of the reason that the more negative topics are discussed because nobody else talks about them or nobody else gives them, nobody else can say what they think about them because the wage is coming from somewhere and the compromise for some reason why they have to avoid stuff essentially. Like we do target, we do talk about the things that are probably uncomfortable for some other people to talk, but we do it from a good place. We do it from a factual point of view. We don't do it from a personal point of view. It's fine. Aidan O'Brien, who is like obviously goes without saying probably the best trainer ever. He can come out and say be positive, but at the same time he's promoting Whirlpool, and it's them that are responsible for the big gaps between racing and the crap racing we've got on Irish Derby Day. So like we're going to call that out without fear or favour, basically. And it's going to be done rationally, in our opinion. And I love the same guys popping up on YouTube saying they're not going to watch, and then they'll comment on the same thing next week. Everywhere I go in Ireland, in England, people come over to us and just say, love that podcast, listen to it every single Monday. And like you said, the numbers reflect that. Like walking through the parade ring at Ascot, people are near the parade ring, people are shouting across the parade ring at you saying, "Love the podcast," and like we know that people. Obviously, there'd be some, you can't agree with us on everything as well. We can say stuff and it's fine to disagree. But we're gonna keep talking about this stuff, and most people are gonna keep listening.
And if it's bad, it's bad. You have to call it bad, and it can't all be sunshine and butterflies with everything as well. So the lads will keep going. Greg Fairley going to have his first ride back on the race course today. His first ride in 14 years. So he's riding in the 3 o'clock at Ayr. So pending when you're listening to this, he'll have had that ride or he's about to have that ride. So Fairley is 37 now. He was a former champion apprentice, also a Group 1 winning rider. And you might recall he was warned off for 12 years in 2011 for stopping a horse from running on its merits and passing on information for reward. So there might be a few people unhappy about this, Harry, but is it just a simple case of man has served his time here and perfectly entitled to come back now and ride? He's been riding out for Ian Jardine and looks like he's going to give it a go anyway.
I don't know the facts of what he has said to the licensing committee, so I can't really pass judgment on whether he should or shouldn't be back. He's been out a long time. I don't like the idea of lifetime bans, bearing in mind that this is a balance of probabilities tribunal, and you only need to be found more likely to have committed the offence than not to be done. This is not like the criminal standard where it's beyond all reasonable doubt. In those circumstances, I really don't like to see almost anyone ruled out indefinitely. I think they should always have the right to come back before a licensing panel or disciplinary panel, if in certain circumstances, and say, let me back in. Inevitably, people will be nervous about jockeys who have been excluded from the sport for corruption offences, for stopping horses, because as far as the rules of the sport are concerned, from a pure integrity point of view, it's absolutely the worst thing you can do. And so people will be nervous, and he's just got to, I think after a period of time, people will come to trust him again, and he's just got to earn that trust back, I suspect.
Would you be comfortable with this, Tony? The guy like this coming back to ride on British racecourses?
Yeah, I've got no problem with it. Yeah, 12 years is a long time, so yeah, I've got no problem with him coming back.
Yeah, start this time. We move on to a question from TJ, who's asked, Harry, you can take this if you don't mind. So, considering Stake have given up their British license, how can they still be Everton's front of shirt sponsor for the upcoming season? You know what might
Yeah,
be going on there?
It's a really interesting question. I spent some time looking into this. The answer, it appears to be that they've made an exception for Everton to wind down this sponsorship agreement because Stake have not got their license here anymore. And strictly speaking, I think that means they can't advertise in Britain to British consumers. My understanding is that perhaps because Everton were in a tricky position, having entered into a commercial arrangement while the license was in place, that there appears to have been an exception with conditions attached to it relating to protections to users of whatever the Everton website, whatever it is, to stop geo-blockers, to stop British consumers using Stake via anything to do with Everton. I think that all front of shirt bookmaker sponsorship is going to go in 1 or 2 years. And so I think basically the commission appear to have taken a pragmatic approach to this and said, well, look, given the situation you're in, given that everyone is going to be in the same boat, I think perhaps at the beginning of next season will allow you to, I think they're winding it down basically. But I think that the person who asked the question is right, that strictly speaking, it's an odd situation. And I think it's taken extraordinary measures in order to allow Everton to do it. There are already very strict conditions on these shirts, which I hadn't realized until looking at yesterday. It just shows you the way the world is changing. I think you have to offer a shirt. If you're sponsored by a bookmaker, you have to offer fans a version of the shirt that doesn't have the bookmaker's name on it. It mustn't be on any under 18s start size shirts, that kind of thing. So it's already a pretty heavily regulated area. And as I say, as I understand it, I'm not an expert in this area, but I think it's being phased out, and we'll see the last bookmaker's name on the football shirt in a year or two.
They might be winding it down, but that winds me up. How's that allowed to happen? Like they're Stake are all over Instagram and TikTok, and they're not even licensed. Like, yeah,
they do appear to be everywhere.
They're constantly targeting UK customers. Yeah,
I think the difficulty from Everton's point of view is that at the point at which they entered into the agreement,
I don't blame Everton. I don't think it's an Everton thing.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. That just can't be allowed. Like it just drives what's the horse and car, or whatever the phrase is. Coach and horses through everything. So we're literally promoting an unlicensed gambling site there, and they're literally all over social media and continue to be more aggressively than ever. I think it
goes back to that point, doesn't it, about what the Gambling Commission is going to be able to do to stop people using black market websites.
Yeah. Buyer beware.
Move on to, we'll stick with you, Harry, again, maybe for a question from Stable. I think it was sent to Tony. So he's just asking about sorry, this is a little bit complicated, so just bear with me 2 seconds as I explain this. So
sure.
He's talking about the ESRI in Ireland, which is the Economic and Social Research Institute. So they were designed to conduct research and help governments from policies. He's saying, usually I never really heeded too much on certain areas, but as history shows, they are seen to be fairly close to the truth. So they have done a study with the newly formed Gambling Regulatory Authority in Ireland. They have stated that free bets and money-back guarantees cannot be purely seen as marketing tools anymore, and that they are also providing financial harm. As AK has an online presence, and the lads on the call all have good opinions, I'd be interested to hear their views on this. So you've done a little bit of research into this, Harry. What do you think he's getting at there?
Yeah, so he's getting at this study that was done. I think they went to 600 people around the time of Euro 2024, men under the age of 40. They gave them, I think, notional bets that they could place. And they gave them various conditions on the way that they could place the bets. Some had free bets, some had money back guarantees. I think that the ones that had the free bets and money back guarantees bet more by 10%, which I would argue was hardly surprising, given that the point of marketing is to get people to increase their betting. But I suppose the more controversial area is where they say that those with gambling issues were more likely to gamble excessively more or comparatively more than those without. But then they use what they call the international accepted standard of people with problem gambling. Lots of people have lots of issues with the way that problem gambling is defined nowadays. It also came to the conclusion that a lot of these people who apparently were bettors did not know that the stakes for a free bet were not returnable. And that strikes me as utterly extraordinary. If you bet and thought that the stakes for lost free bets would come back to you, I've almost struggled to believe that people understood the question if they were people who bet. And I think that it is obviously valuable to be looking at problem gambling issues. I just wonder whether it's falling into that trap that seems now really to be getting a dangerous hold on the industry, which is that it conflates people betting more with, in other words, it says that almost any kind of increase in betting is a bad thing or a worrying thing, which rather leaves operators hamstrung, because marketing is inevitably going to capture, to an extent, people who have less healthy relationships with gambling than others. In the same way that if you reduce a bottle of wine in a supermarket, it's going to catch people who have drinking problems as well as those that don't. And I think that I haven't read the detail of this study in particular detail, but I just worry that all of this is based on the idea that any increase in gambling is something to worry about. And I don't think it is. I think that the job of operators is to increase the number of people gambling, with the enormous caveat that they have to try and weed out as many people who have gambling problems as possible. You're never going to weed out everyone, because apart from anything else, it's very difficult often to decide what someone is if they have a gambling problem, or this financial harm stuff, which is a totally different ball game I'm not going to get into. And it would just be nice, I suppose, from what AK would say is every now and again someone did a study into the joy and pleasure people get from gambling. I don't think I've ever seen one.
Yeah. The joy people get from gambling, the utility derived without causing any harm is off the charts. And listen, I wouldn't conclude anything from a study of 600 people, even if I thought the study was, even if I agreed with all the parameters of the study.
I think it was 600 people. Yeah,
the sample, if that's the sample, sure.
Well, it's 600 people and men under the age of 40 as well.
It's very specific. Yeah. It's very specific. It leads to a 10% increase in bets for those 600 people. So,
but also, how are they identifying them as people who have some gambling experience, if they are also people who largely thought that they'd be able to basically cash in their free stakes? That doesn't quite ring true to me.
This is an industry that just fannies around this issue, and with people that don't understand it. Like, we've got, again, the latest NHS survey, the gold standard, 0.4% of people experience gambling harm. Target those 0.4% and treat them with all the as part of the revenue. The fact that you can just add yourself to a list and think that they're done, they're dealt with. The industry and legislators and bloody regulators, everybody should be actively doing everything they can for those 0.4% of people. And then the bloody 99.6% of people who derive enormous enjoyment from this activity safely, leave them alone.
I think the danger is also it is now open to a criticism of becoming performative, this stuff about anti-gambling things, is whether there is actually the underlying desire to help people with gambling problems, or whether you just don't want to be criticized for not having helped them, and therefore you make a lot of noise about it.
It's all virtue signaling and how much money can you get out of this. Like, there's very little treatment of any of those 0.4%. Stick them on a list and they're dealt with. Like, no, they're not. Like, if you actually want to solve or go somewhere into, like, the rates are unbelievably low for an activity that people derive so much enjoyment from and contribute so much to the exchequer, absolutely everything. This is an unbelievably highly regulated, highly taxed industry. Target the 0.4% and help them. Leave everyone else alone.
Yeah, we kind of move on just with time against us here, but thanks for that question from Stable. I raised an interesting discussion there. And Neil Tolson, I'll get to your question next week if you don't mind. It's a question for Harry to do with AML checks that you mentioned on the Smart Bash discussion. We might grab that next week, Neil. And I'll just move on to the Tote, lads, because another bit of news here. We won't dwell too much on this because we discussed it plenty in the last few weeks, but during the week, it was reported in the Racing Post, the UK Tote Group made an operating loss of 7.4 million going back to September 29th last year, according to his latest set of accounts. So the performance was a big advance on the last year when the group recorded a 12.4 million loss. The loss after taxation for the period also narrowed to 6.7 million, having been 13.5 million the previous year. So the operator said the period had been one of continued operational progress, both domestically and internationally. Financial performance had improved significantly thanks to like-for-like pool turnover growth and margin improvements. Tony, what do you make of this, considering everything we've discussed in the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, I wouldn't be the best person to analyze a business spreadsheet. Anthony's probably better placed there, but yeah, I mean, it's, if you are losing less money, then there's obviously a positive sign, but as we said, there's probably a lack of transparency in there, but we won't go into that once again. They've had a few issues. The Eclipse on Saturday was meant to be a world pool event. They couldn't do that because of technical issues. Yeah, and we also got some really curious returns on the Eclipse, actually. Bradley Green asked us a question, wondering what happened here. He actually gave us a a screenshot of all the win and place returns on the Eclipse, which, like I said, was about Whirlpool money. He said, wondering what happened here with the Tote place returns on the Eclipse. Ombudsman returned a bigger price to place than he went off to win. I think he was 2.5 to win and 2.65 to place, which is curious. Even more curious, rule in court went off at 101 to be placed. So I'm not sure how much money was washing around in that market without Whirlpool, but it's probably a good window into how reliant these big races are on Hong Kong money. But yeah, as regards the business angle, I probably wouldn't be best placed to comment on that.
Yeah, like we know that there's no liquidity in these markets from the UK. There's just nothing there, as those returns show. When technical issues stop the slosh of no affordability check, Far Eastern customers playing into them.
We're going to say goodbye to you from here, Harry, before we do the last part of the podcast. So thanks very much for your contribution this week.
Not
We
at
bid you
all.
adieu.
That's all right.
And
You can all
we'll-
look forward to getting letters of claim from me after this. So behave yourselves. All right. Bye.
Cheers, Harry.
Cheers, Harry. We'll
Yeah,
talk
man.
next week. And we will discuss the Oisin Murphy situation now, lads. So just before we do, I'll read out basically the nuts and bolts of what's gone on. So Oisin Murphy has got a £17,000 fine, been banned from driving for 20 months. But the BHA says the four-time jockey can continue riding. So the judge, when sentencing Oshi Murphy last week, said you are lucky that neither you or your passenger or the public were injured by your actions. I do balance that with the remorse you've shown for your actions. You have also recognised that you have let the public down by virtue of your actions and your colleagues in the racing world. And Oshi Murphy sent out a tweet after all this had come out later in the day. He just said, I would like to sincerely apologize for my actions. I know that drink driving is unacceptable and there's no excuse for what I did. I've let a lot of people down. I particularly want to apologize to my passenger and her family. I've so far been able to share only minimal details of my offence with the British Horse Racing Authority as a result of the police investigation. I will now be fully cooperative with their inquiries, and it would not be appropriate for me to comment further until that process is concluded. So we have a number of questions in this on this, and people just raising points. Tony, I'll let you get into it first with your first immediate kind of thoughts on it, and if you want to reference some of the questions along your way to see what you had interesting.
I'll just give an overarching comment on this before we get into the specific questions. Might as well draw them one by one. The thing that immediately stood out to me was the judge's statement saying nobody was injured in this, because if you remember when the police put out a call for witnesses to this, they actually said, the passenger was seriously injured or comments along those lines. So when the judge said that immediately kind of like was the big news line of that. I mean, I think, the fact that he was over the limit, he got a 70 grand fine and a 20-month ban. I think that's probably in keeping with the the non-custodial sentences were handed out in these cases for a first offence. So that didn't really surprise me. I think people's take on this generally is if they've been affected by drink driving, they're going to look at this completely more harshly than somebody who's never had, any experience of that or any negativity around that. So I can understand why people are getting real up in arms, because for the grace of God, if you're over the limit and you have an accident, it's how far was he away from from his career being in ruins? And you'd hope and expect this would be a final last warning to his behaviour. Clearly, he's got drink problems and other associated addictions that the BHA will, as he alluded to there, he's yet to speak to them and give the full facts of the case. But I imagine when the BHA sit down with him, if they haven't already, they'll be putting, strict kind of like monitoring on his license, and you'd imagine it in the early stages it might be a daily occurrence, if not a weekly occurrence. So yeah, I don't massively have a strong opinion on this, but we'll take the questions one by one.
AK, I'll bring the questions in here and then maybe bring you in. So I'll start off with John. I'm going to mispronounce your name, John Sibilis. Apologies for that. Murphy pleaded guilty and was dealt with accordingly by the judiciary. That's called justice, and that's the end of it. Some of the pearl clutching reactions online are almost calling for a lynch party. And then David is asking, does racing risk undermining its integrity by allowing high profile riders to continue competing while serious off track offences are under investigation? I think mandatory stand down policy pending review in these cases will be beneficial. So he's kind of asking there, why was Murphy allowed to ride on when this case was obviously known to be going on in the background? If you an opinion here, a strong opinion on any particular aspect of it, AK?
From the second point there, I'll leave that to somebody who's more au fait with what's required from a regulation point of view and what the correct process is there. I suppose I'm just giving my opinion, maybe just as a layman in the street, essentially. Just from the outside looking in, we all know it, great jockey, etc. But I think the words at this stage are pretty hollow now. It's statements showing remorse are fairly worthless at this stage, I think, unfortunately. I think he's been given enough chances from my point of view. And whatever conditions are imposed on his return or going forward, I'd imagine they need to be unbelievably stringent, because like it's an awkward one, because obviously anyone who's suffering from certain things, my immediate reaction is to show compassion and understanding and things like that. But then I think if I'm walking down the side of the street with my kids and some balloon is driving down the street, tanked up, swerving all over the road, it's the contrasting feelings for me for both of those things that I think unfortunately my disdain for the second part of that equation is probably overrides the first part, and it's probably got to that stage from me. Unbelievably talented. God, like I don't know what the next steps are. I'm not qualified to understand that and give an optimal opinion on that. But it feels like the absolute line in the sand here. If it hasn't been passed already, and you sort yourself out, or you remove yourself either by will or by somebody else from the game for a decent period of time, and focus on getting things back in order. And my overriding opinion is to wish him well and hope that he gets the help he needs if he needs help. But yeah, I think I just have that overriding thing. If I'm walking down the street with my kids at the side and there's somebody, I don't care what your reason is, I'm just not happy with that.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair way of putting it. And there's lots of people who will be listening to this and sadly might have been affected by something tragic happening on the road, and will have very little time for what has happened here, I guess. Just to bring in a few more questions to give them a mention. So Sean was asking, if Oisin was a journeyman jockey, would the BHA have acted more robustly? As in, if he wasn't a four-time champion jockey, would he have got the same treatment? Stuart Ackerster is asking, who in the racing media has embarrassed themselves the most with their support for Oisin Murphy since the incident happened, and especially recently since all the full facts have come to light? Steve Gravy Train says, key question on Murphy for me is, what were the license conditions after the previous issues? I think this was mentioned on the Nick Luck podcast as well. Surely they must have been related to ongoing sobriety. And these have been breached now more than twice the legal limit, 7 hours after the crash.
Yeah,
and the BHA sanctioned this. It seems very opaque. I think they did discuss that in detail. He would have, if he was tested at the races the following day, he wouldn't have been allowed to ride, and would have been a similar breach to what he went through
I think
before.
I don't know the science behind that now. I'm sure you'll be able to find it on some kind of guide online, but over twice the limit, over 7 hours later, that's a lot, isn't it? I'd imagine.
Yeah,
That was interesting because someone flagged this up to me yesterday about people were saying he was when they eventually tested him at 7 a.m. the next morning, he was still um twice over the limit. But I got a lot, and so someone contacted me yesterday saying, no, this is not correct. And it wasn't anybody attached to this podcast. It was a friend of mine just said, you've got to clarify this. So I did a little bit of digging, and on the Racing TV a story on this. And this is, I'll say exactly what they wrote. I'm presuming it is accurate, but if it is accurate, it is against most press reports that I've seen on this. It said Murphy was later discharged to take a breathalyzer test at a police station at about 7 a.m., which showed a reading of 66 milligrams per 100 milliliters of breath. This meant he was just shy of twice above the drink driving limit at the time of driving, prosecutor Richard Atkins told the court.
So
So
it was double 7 hours previous. Is that right?
yes, that I think, however way you extrapolate,
Yeah.
and predate it. So I think the idea that he was still twice over the limit when they tested him 7 hours later appears to be inaccurate,
Yeah,
but there is some confusion around that. But
yeah.
look, we're talking.
I think that's part of the problem. Like everyone's got an opinion on it, myself included, and you kind of just go and yeah, we all probably don't know the full facts of this. Yeah, you're going off what you heard. As soon as it happened, we were getting messages the next morning. Have you heard this? Have you heard this? So there was plenty of rumor going around, passengers in this state, etc. Judge now saying that maybe that's not the case. Like we do need to be careful with what we're saying because it's based on a lot of the comment, myself included, and my own opinion is kind of based on summarization of what's out there already, which may not be accurate as well. So I think in fairness, you'd like a journalist to establish the facts, I suppose. And if we're all still half not knowing the story at this stage,
Yeah.
it's not ideal.
It's it's worth remembering that I think the judge dismissed the separate case of him refusing to give a breath test at the scene, so they didn't pursue that line. So there must have been a good reason for him not to give a sample at that stage. I imagine that what Oshi Murphy related to in his statement. I mean, he is presumably going to now be at liberty to give the BHA chapter and verse for them to make their final decision. Now, it's not a given that he keeps his license, but it sounds like he's going to be highly likely to continue riding with very, very stringent rules around him and testing procedures around him. I think that's probably the best way to do it. I mean, just to wrap up all those questions in one hit. I mean, the fine he got, people said, "Oh, it's kind of like quite light fine, 70 grand." But I think people were saying that Ant McPartland got 86 grand, and he must be worth zillions, mustn't he? So I think that's in keeping with that. As regards the press, it was always a very tricky one because there are strict. There are, as we've seen on this podcast as well in previous weeks, there are strict guidelines of what you can and can't say when a criminal case is still ongoing. So I give the press a pass there. It was always a very tricky one for the media, TV media, to actually interview him and comment upon him when they know this was hanging up in the air and possibly the most likely outcome. And I wouldn't be in a position to say who's covered themselves in glory or not in the press about covering this, but Dominic King of the Daily Mail wrote a pretty scathing assessment of Oshi Murphy after the verdict was known, which is quite punchy for a racing journalist, considering it sounds like they will have to deal with him going forward. So yeah, I'm always in favour of strong articles on either side of the fence, whether it's defending or attacking him or defending him or not. So yeah, I'm torn on this. I must admit. I mean, having listened to Anthony, I think the idea of some idiot well over the limit. You know, if I'm walking down the road with my grandson or whatever like that, and some idiot crashes into a tree right in front of me, or for the grace of God,
Maybe fuming. You'd fucking drag him out of the car, wouldn't you? If
you would. You would.
Yeah, you'd be
I honestly
absolutely
would.
fuming. Yeah.
You honestly would. You
Yeah.
honestly would. So I think, like just to finalise it, I think a lot of people's final angle on this would be, if you have been touched and affected by a drunk driver, you want the book thrown at him, and you want him banned from riding racehorses for a while. But natural justice suggests that he should be given a final chance and allowed to pursue his career with strict guidelines enforced.
Yeah, I think it's always just I don't know. It shouldn't be. It's the same when a good horse gets injured. It's always sad to see somebody with so much talent having problems and kind of you're not making the most of it essentially. So I do wish him well, but not ideal.
No, we'll see how things go, and hopefully it is. Although it's been said before, this could be the line in the sand moment. Maybe this is the final one and the proper one, and he can turn things around. And we'll see how the BHA deal with the case from their side in the coming weeks as well. I suppose we do questions very quickly, lads. Only two of you guys to answer them, so we should be able to zoom through them. This is general questions to the podcast. Thanks for everyone for sending them in again. Arsenal Trader asks, why are Ballydoyle gambles generally ignored? They seem to carry real weight and translate into performances, yet Delacroix all week in line in winter, who had halved in price for the John Pratt, just seemed to be brushed off. Tony, what do you reckon?
Yeah, I wouldn't follow the moves of Aidan O'Brien horses, especially in Ireland, that closely. But there is a kind of like acceptance out there that the late money from this mob is normally on the mark or near the mark. Like I said, I don't take too much notice of market moves myself. But yeah, clearly, if there's money for one, then it's an indicator of sorts, isn't it? But I haven't got a firm opinion on that. I'd like to say I'm not close enough to Irish racing to answer that.
Yeah, I think there's more movement anti-post of late, just with running plans and people being aware of might be backing on that stuff of things they know. Yeah, I think on the day of, I'm always looking for moves in liquid markets. I'm afraid movement overnight might indicate something, but doesn't indicate much has been traded. Maybe barter one account, maybe.
Yeah.
With regard to the eclipse, this is a question you were alluding to earlier on, Tony. So John Gaston predicted before the eclipse it could be a messy race, which begs the question: why didn't Godolphin supplement a pacemaker for Ombudsman? Surely the art of winning top races is to try and eliminate as many unpredictable variables as possible. That's a question from Dejour.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, this is on the back of Field of Gold not having a pacemaker in the Guineas when he got beat, isn't it? So I think there's a bit of a related factor there. I'm not too sure how many other Godolphin horses John Gosling trains for Godolphin, and I imagine it wouldn't have been cheap to supplement a horse into the Eclipse on Monday. So I'm not sure if he had a suitable horse for that, or whether he was given free rein to do so when he was looking at the race on Monday morning. But yeah, the Ombudsman had every chance to win that race. Traded heavy odds on him running. I don't think the shape of the race and the way it panned out would have been a massive factor in that horse getting beaten. So I think the pacemaker has probably got more to do with harking back to Field of Gold in the Guineas rather than Ombudsman on the day itself.
A Lucky Day asks a question for you, AK. We know the liquidity on exchanges for racing has declined But do you know if this is racing specific or this can be seen across other sports?
Oh, I always think it often depends on what deals a couple of exchanges have with market makers at different times. I think people still look at the exchange predominantly for racing and greyhound racing, even because, especially in racing, I think because the prices are traded for so long, but it's still seen as a reference because essentially because not many people can get on at early prices anymore, just because they're so weak, just in general. So I think people have this over reliance on the exchange, even still, even though it's the exchange is a weird one for horse racing. Everybody knows it's in probably terminal decline, but everybody also probably can't get much on with bookmakers essentially. So that's probably why the exchange is still relevant there. When you're looking at other sports, the exchange probably isn't anywhere near as relevant. A good example is I was trying to lay Alcaraz the other day on the exchange account that I use sometimes, and I couldn't get matched for anything, even though going 0.04, 0.06 bigger than the standard price. I just couldn't take anything out of them. Whereas if you went to across all the bookmakers in the UK and Ireland, you could probably have 100 grand on a player to win. So it's kind of different for like if horse racing, no one talks about place markets when they talk about exchange. Everyone mentions the exchange and talk about win markets with 10 minutes to the off, which is probably when you can bet onto an exchange. You can't get matched.
No.
Fucking washer in the fucking place markets. Place markets are non-existent.
Yeah.
A minute to the off. Like, so it's literally the exchange is just a win market a few minutes to the off now. Everything else
And also
irrelevant.
coming back to that tote, that ruling court 101 to be placed. The tote, I'm pretty sure the tote guarantee is not in place in the place markets. So if you
Yeah.
back ruling court and it finished first or second, you would have been paid out at 101.
At what point is that a problem? Like, that's just that's just shocking. Like, can you imagine? Can you imagine someone going off and having a fiver on ruling court to place on the tote and getting 5p back? Like,
Yeah, they would have had to have stepped in at that point and taken the loss themselves. But it's not. I don't think the place market is guaranteed. But yeah, I agree with you. Liquidity, I just by necessity, I have to use it. And the place markets are woeful. The each way markets used to be quite vibrant. No, it's pretty grim stuff.
Indeed. We talked about earlier on, or Tony, you mentioned earlier on the good crowd at the Eclipse on Saturday, and Pete Houghton just kind of with his question expanding on that a little bit. So, looking at reruns of the Eclipse yesterday, it shows the old Sandown Silver Ring is packed. Do you think reopening Silver Rings would boost the sport? £10 to get in reaches an audience that won't pay £35 to watch top class racing. Sandown, Windsor, Newbury, Ascot, maybe King George or British Champions Day. So I'm not too familiar with this. I don't think we have that kind of tiered attendance fees in Ireland, AK, but I think this is like a cheaper option for people to come in and watch racing on the day in a silver ring kind of option.
yeah,
Do you see what he's getting at there, or what
yeah,
do you think?
definitely. Like Ireland's it's part of the reason I love Ireland is you're literally paid to get in through the gate, and that's where you're in with everyone, basically. You're literally in with everybody. And one of the best things about Ireland that I've always said is one of my favorite things about Ireland. It's the unpredictability of people's wealth. It's you walk past a lad who's got 5 million quid in the bank in the UK, and you fucking know it because he's showing you that he's got 5 million by what he's wearing and stuff like that. You can literally walk past a lad in Ireland who's got no teeth in his head. He's fucking dressed in the clothes he wore 20 years ago, and he's worth 500 million quid. Like it's like it's unbelievable. It's actually class from just a general mixing of people. I think it's unbelievable over here. I'd have literally I'd have one of the things I noticed was when we bought I barely buy tickets, definitely not in the UK because I'm never there, but bought tickets for Windsor for the lads when before Ascot, and there was like 7 or 8 options for what package you're going to get, what ticket you're going to get, what stand you're going to be in, what access you're going to be in. Can you access the parade ring? Can you do this? Like Ireland is literally just 30 quid, lads. Give me the money there. No charge for parking. Like everyone in together, and I think that's just miles better. I think you could probably England could do it a lot by just literally having an area where everyone can go into and you can do everything, and then you just have a much cheaper ticket that's in the middle of the track, and then that's literally it.
Yeah, it just in answer to the question, the answer is yes, there should be. I think Royal Ascot had a £25 option. When my old man used to take me racing when I was 10 or 11 first, we used to go to Windsor all the time, and we used to go in the Silver Ring. It was really vibrant. It wouldn't have cost hardly any money for him to actually get in there. Yeah, I think we should hark back to the old days, get a really cheap option, and as long as there's enough bookmakers and facilities there, yes, I'd be all in favour of giving people the cheapest option available.
Very good. Final question from Ed Johnson. 10 UK and Irish meetings over the weekend, all 10 on Racing TV, none on Sky Sports Racing. How confused are the racing broadcast arrangements in this country, Tony?
I've always said that when they do the fixture lists, they should try and take into account the TV station covering that. Because Sky Sports Racing last weekend, I imagine it was full of French racing, greyhound racing, and you haven't got time to have a piss if you're watching racing TV and punting and all that. So yeah, but nobody's got any control over the fixture list by the race courses, so we have to suck it up for now, don't we?
One for the in-tray, Lord Allen, if he does get the gig, suggest there. But that's it for this week. Gents, thanks very much for your input as always, and thanks again for those listening and watching. And we will be back next week at the usual time. Thank you.